Hello, 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 and welcome to another episode of Podcast Pasta. That's podcast that's like pasta, not the podcast that's about pasta. As always, I'm your host, Mike, and I have a solo episode for you all today. Kind of a spur of the moment thing. I was honestly debating if I wanted to record this and put this out there, but I recently finished playing Dispatch, and it's one of those pieces of media that really compelled me to want to talk about it in some capacity. I figured, what better way than in the show that I host talking about media of all kinds. So yeah, that's what I'm going to do today. Talk about my experience with the game, basically praising it because I do love it a lot, but also kind of sharing some criticism I've had with Dispatch that I don't really think I've seen or heard other people discuss at all. I mean, maybe they have, but again, I'm just not really in the sphere to have heard those criticisms. Because a lot of posts I've seen have also been just people fawning over the game, kind of like me. But I guess okay. I guess I will explain too that due to the spur of the nature of this episode, I don't have B-roll of me playing Dispatch as the background for those of you that are watching this in a video format. And as a general rule for myself, I don't really like to put narrative games as my B-roll just because I don't want to spoil anything. So just keep that in mind. But I guess I'll start with how I first got exposed to Dispatch. So like a lot of other people, I first heard about Dispatch with the VGA announcements. It was Aaron Paul and Laura Bailey showing some footage of the game, and I didn't really think much of it at the time. I don't know if this is just me misremembering the announcement, but I honestly couldn't remember if it was first if they were first talking about it as an interactive experience, or if it was being pitched as a series. And from what I've seen with other posts and things like that, there was a part of development in which they were wanting to pitch it as a series to a streaming service. I think Prime or something like that. And but anyways, seeing that initial footage, I thought, oh, it kind of looks interesting. I think the most surprising thing from what I remember was Charlie or Moist Critical voicing this half man, half bad person, which, oh, that's kind of interesting. But again, didn't really think much of it at the time, so moved on with my life. Skipping a bit ahead, I think they released a standalone demo for it, which I didn't really check out. And I think some people did, but it wasn't really generating the buzz that we're hearing as opposed to now post its release. So again, kind of ignored it, and then now fast forward to when the game was first released. I think it was near the end of October, and I didn't pick it up at first because I don't remember there being any fanfare. Maybe there was a launch trailer, but I just don't remember it being advertised. It just kind of popped up out of the blue. I just noticed on Steam, and but again, didn't really pick it up at the time. It wasn't until on my feed I started getting a lot of videos talking about the game and showing off different cutscenes from the game. That it's I kind of got peer pressured into finally just playing it. So I was okay, fine. I have some money left over from my birthday or whatever. So I picked up the game, and I am very, very glad I did. It's a great experience. I guess kind of getting into more my starting with my praise of the game and stuff. Yeah, it's amazing. I had such a good time with it. I think my favorite aspect of this game is definitely obviously the characters, which are brought to life with some incredible voice acting. And not only the voice acting, I have to give kind of a huge props, I think, to the voice direction too. One of the concerns that I had, when first starting up the game and looking more into it, in the voice cast and everything, and noticing that they brought on a lot of outside yeah, I guess I'll say talent that doesn't really have experience directly voice acting. So Moist Critical, Jacksepticeye, my boy Joel Haber. I was kind of worried that with their voices, it was going to have this weird cameo effect where you hear them voicing these characters, and because of their lack of experience, is going to come off as you're hearing a person doing you're just hearing the person recording the voice. You're not hearing the character, if that kind of makes sense. Kind of like how cameos work in Smiling Friends, right? Where it's like, oh, it's Chills doing this character, or it's Doug Walker doing this character. And granted, in Smiling Friends, that like whole kind of like a cameo effect, I'll call it, like works because it's like small, like, you know, like, oh, you're supposed to be able to just quickly pick up, oh, that's Chills, or like whatever. But like for a longer narrative like this, you don't really want that effect because it could kind of be distracting. But no, luckily, I think all the performances sound very natural, and I have to give a lot of props to my boy Joel Haver. You know, I know I've critiqued his work in the past, but like when he delivers, man, he delivers. The thing that really sold me on Joel was there was like a particular scene too. For context, he plays Waterboy in Dispatch, and in my run, I picked him as like my replacement for one of the other you know, team members I have to like kind of cut. I'll try and avoid spoilers where I can, and I'll warn you where it is. So I apologize if I'm being vague here, but yeah. Point is, you get Waterboy to join the team, and after his first shift, you have to kind of give him a bit of this pep talk, you know, because he's in the storage closet. And as the scene was playing out, um, Joel was doing, because Waterboy kind of has like this stammer to his speech, and it's crazy because I've known people that have like a similar stammer. It's not like a stutter. It's like, you know, their brain is working, is like overclocking to thinking like what they want to say, so they're like stumbling over their own words. And you could argue I do it myself with like podcasting or whatever, because of how fast I speak sometimes. But anyways, as I was watching the scene play out, it was like dawning on me that like, oh man, Joel is like actually really pulling off this stammer really well, which is very difficult to do as like an acting thing in general, and it really works. And even for some behind the scenes too, like giving more praise to the voice direction. I remember there was like interviews where they were talking. They interviewed Joel Haver specifically, and at first he went in doing like kind of an impression, you know, like not his real voice, but kind of like a character, like coming in doing a character. And then they had to come back and saying like, no, just kind of stick with like normal voice, which I think is such a smart voice to like, kind of like the moment I knew the voice direction was really like solid in this game, because like with that type of direction, you know, you have to think of acting as like comparing to like fighting games, like this mental stack. And like especially for people who don't have experience like doing characters, doing acting like that, you want to just focus on like nailing the motion of a scene down, and you don't want to have to add on top of like, you know, trying to nail down the lines and everything, like doing a character, trying to get the proper inflections, trying to get the proper accent and things like that. So I imagine like a lot of the other actors were also kind of given like similar directions too, like, you know, Moist Critical, Jacksepticeye, and it really works out. Very surprising, given that like a lot of like, again, especially with like Moist Critical and Jacksepticeye, these are people that have very iconic voices, so it would have been very easily to just like again fall into like that cameo effect, but they do a really good job of balancing it out. And I think at the time of this recording, they recently announced like nominations for the VGAs. And I don't know if they have like, I know they have like a category for like performance, but I don't think they have it for like general voice direction. But if they did, I would definitely say Dispatch deserves a nomination. I don't think it would win because unfortunately it's competing against Expedition 33, which also does have a lot of really good performances in there. But no, I think just like overall the characters and the performances, I think, is what sold me and honestly a lot of other people. Yeah, great game, definitely would recommend it. However, and this is where I'm going to start getting into like kind of my criticisms and a bit of my hot takes here. So again, keep in mind I do really like this game, but after, you know, playing it and thinking about, you know, contemplating my whole experience and everything, while it is good, I will still say it's not my favorite Telltale like, and it's just part of it's unfair because it's competing against what I consider to be the GOAT, and that's Wolf Among Us. I'm sorry, it's so good. Like I was thinking back to my experience with Wolf Among Us, and comparing it to Dispatch, like running through the different categories. Like for example, visuals. Dispatch looks good. There are some issues that I have with some of the designs that I'll talk about later, but while Dispatch does look good, Wolf Among Us I think is like the peak of like the Telltale aesthetic, and how it complements like the story that they were trying to tell there with like the harsh shading, the thicker lines, the oh my god, the lighting, dude. it was so good in Wolf Among Us. You know, the story I get again very good in Dispatch. Some personal issues I have with it. Again, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But The Wolf Among Us just personally plays for me so much better because a lot of it is kind of like this crime. For those of you who haven't played it, it's kind of this like crime drama, crime suspense thriller or whatever. And that's like one of my favorite genres in media. Like a lot of my favorite fiction is like crime drama or crime thriller. Um, so there's that. Sound was kind of a weird one for me to evaluate in my head because with Dispatch you have two different types of like soundtracks. You have like the licensed music and the non-licensed music, which both sound good. I think there are good individual tracks there that I actually want to add to my Spotify playlist. When I can. But uh, it's also scored very differently, I think. Both the games are kind of scored differently. Like, in The Wolf Among Us, I don't think you really have. It's been a while since I played Wolf Among Us, but I don't think you really have any licensed tracks. But I do remember like some of the general. They kind of go for like this general soundscape, and I do remember a lot of the specific themes from that, like the heavy synths with like the intro song to the different chapters. If you played The Wolf Among Us, you know what I'm talking about. The main menu music was also really solid in that. But yeah, I'm sorry. Again, nothing against Dispatch, but like Wolf Among Us is like the greatest for me, which makes the news with Wolf Among Us 2 kind of very unfortunate. But that's like another topic that I don't want to get into here. And so yeah, going into kind of like I guess some of my, and I should preface by saying that these criticisms are like very minor. They don't in any way ruin the experience. They're just kind of gripes that I have that kind of keep me, I guess, from putting this game in like the top category, to overtake like Wolf Among Us as like my favorite Telltale. Like, if I had to be like kind of, yeah, I guess I'll say kind of like nitpicky, if I will. But yeah, with the character designing, I think, the art style looks very good, but the issue I kind of have is that some of the designs of characters feel like either very bland or they just didn't do enough with it, or really anything with it. I think the most egregious example for me is Malvora. I think it's Malvora. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing her name. She's basically the red demon girl with portals that you get in your party. And again, have to preface, she is a very attractive character. I'm not saying she's not attractive, but if you go back and look at her costume, she's basically just wearing a white tank top and jean shorts with like black heels. And it's like, are you fighting crime or are you like starring in a Pepsi ad? Like, what are you doing? Right? It's so weird. I don't know why they didn't like try anything more with her design, like with her costuming beyond that. And there are a few characters like that. Punch Up kind of looks like a hipster bartender. Again, like the character, but that's just the vibe that I got from his whole appearance. Shroud looks like a Red Hood clone wearing like that mask from Dispatch, or no, I'm sorry, not Dispatch, Dishonored. If you know what I'm talking about, like the whole mask I think Corvo wears. If I'm remembering his name right, I think. And yeah, and a lot of the designs just kind of fall into there, which, not to say all the designs are bad. I like Coops a lot. I think the simplicity kind of works for her. I like the whole color scheme of like black with like the silver accenting. I think really works for her. Conceptually, I like Water Boys because I like how he has to constantly wear like this bathing suit because he's always wet. And like I guess every other character kind of falls in between that for me. Which again, these aren't like bad designs, and I'm glad they didn't fall into the instinct of like over designing these characters, to the point where their designs would be distracting. I just think there was more that could have been done, with some of them. Uh, but I guess I don't know. What do I know? Like, I know like a lot of artist people have really been taken to these characters, especially like redrawing them in their own styles and everything like that. So, just I thought I was throwing out there. Um, the next kind of okay, so I don't consider this next criticism to be kind of a big one because it's more so of like I guess what I wanted the story to be versus they ultimately did with it, which I think again they did like a fine job and everything, but I was kind of bothered with two specific plot points, and this is kind of an area where I will be going a bit more into spoilers. So if you haven't played the game, I do encourage you, despite this small section here, to play it. It's a wonderful experience. There's a reason why it is getting the praise that it is getting. I did thoroughly enjoy my time with it. But yeah, going into the two plot points I didn't really care much for was and the reason why I'm talking about them together is, like I said, interlinked, connected together. Is I didn't like the focus of making Shroud you know, um, the main villain or the main antagonist that the final conflict is centered around. And I didn't like giving Robert the Mecha Man suit back, at least not now. But I guess even in general, I wouldn't have liked it. And so the reason for it, I guess, is what I thought they were doing with like the conflict, at least in the first part of this game. So to give some of you context, if you haven't played it, and for some reason you've stuck around after my spoiler warning. So in the first part, like it's we follow the perspective of Robert. He's going after he's on this mission to go after Shroud, right? And he's doing this as like Mecha Man, which is like this robotic suit that he uses to fight crime. Otherwise, he can't really fight crime. He goes after them and he gets beat, like essentially through the fight that he has with like Shroud and some of his goons. He loses the Mecha Man suit, and it kicks off kind of our story and what I thought the main conflict, or at least the conflict for the first part of this game, and I think what drew a lot of other people to this game, which is, can Robert build a life for himself outside of Mecha Man, right? That was kind of like the big question that the narrative is asking, Robert, and by extension, you as a player. And I really liked that like kind of direction, kind of that conflict, because it's like very mature, especially for like a superhero story, and it's kind of relatable, right? Like as somebody that has grown up, that has like experienced my own failures, trying to like kind of adjust and build a life for yourself after like failing at what you thought you were going to be doing for the rest of your life. I found it like super. I found it extremely relatable, right? And a very mature kind of direction for the story. And I like how a lot of the narrative, at least, I mean, for the most part, kind of fits into that conflict, because the answer that the story gives us for how Robert builds his life back up is Z Team and his work as a dispatcher and his potential romance with either Blazer or Invisigal, right? And I really loved that conflict, like building this relationship with Z Team and everything, and seeing it slowly develop as episodes went on, right? And it's also reflected in like the fan response too, like when you see people talking about talking about Dispatch and talking about like their experience with it. It's mostly through their perspective of like them talking about like Z Team. Like most of the fan art is like Z Team, Invisigal, Blonde Blazer, Robert, everything. Like people don't really, honestly, I don't think people really care that much about like Shroud, right? Like for me, Shroud's purpose kind of worked as just like a catalyst for leading Robert down this path. So it's weird that like in later episodes, they decided to like bring Shroud back to kind of, I guess they wanted to give Robert that final confrontation with Shroud, because it's kind of like, the thing that was like in the air in his story. And I get that impulse. And I want to say that Shroud isn't a bad, like, I don't know if I'd say he's poorly written himself. Like, he's a bad character. I hate Shroud, like, personally, because of, what he does and everything in the story. But, like, I wouldn't say he's like, he himself is poorly written. He himself is poorly written or poorly acted. He's menacing. Matt Mercer does a really good job with, like, this kind of dark, booming, echo, like, kind of threatening voice that he gives the character and everything. So I'm not saying, like, he was necessarily written or performed bad or anything like that, but it just feels like bringing him back into the story it just kind of goes against what I thought they were doing with, like, this more mature, like, look at, like, failure and coming back from that. And I feel like the only reason that why they brought back Shroud for the finale is that they thought, well, we're doing a superhero story. We have to have this epic climax with, like, this big, villain or whatever, instead of just telling this, like, slice of life story throughout the narrative. So, and a part of that too is also, and with that, part of that final conflict is, like, you take a more active part in it because you get back the Mecha Man suit and you actually fight alongside Z Team, which, I get it, is kind of cool because it shows, like, your full growth with Z Team, where you can, like, fight and coordinate alongside them. I get that, but at the same time, like, I guess the way that I was playing Robert was that he was somebody that didn't, like, again, the question was, does he need Mecha Man? And for me, no, he didn't. Like, he was proving to himself through his work as a dispatcher that, like, he could do good even without being Mecha Man, that he can inspire, that despite not having the suit, he can still inspire others to do good. And there's even, like, a dialogue choice that kind of talks about where he's contemplating, like, his work as a dispatcher, and he even says that, with Z Team, he could potentially do way more good than he can as just Mecha Man. That they could do more good through his guidance than, like, just him working alone. So it just seems weird to, like, he just gets the suit back, and especially, like, for the ending, right? Because, like, yeah, it's a nice ending and everything. Z Team finally comes together as a team, but, like, does Robert just stay as their dispatcher? Like, why would he? He could just be Mecha Man. He could just go with them and just have somebody else be dispatcher. So I don't know. I again, not enough to ruin it for me because with what they do with the ending, with what they do with the narrative, I think I'm fine with it. It's just, I guess I was just looking for. I don't know. I guess I just kind of what I'd much prefer just the focus on, like, the whole slice of life aspect of it and everything like that. I personally didn't need a direct confrontation with Shroud. Like, if you wanted to do the confrontation with Shroud, I think it should have just been done purely through Robert still being the dispatcher and, like, Z Team confronts him. I was bouncing around, like, an idea with my head, like, oh, would it be interesting if, I mean, it would take a lot of, like, planning, but, like, if instead of having, like, Shroud being, like, this, because other people have kind of complained too that, like, the ending and the conflict with Shroud was kind of rushed at the end because, for context, throughout most of the game, like, Shroud only appears in, like, 2 or 3 chapters. I don't know if his story is more explained in, like, supplemental material, but you don't really get enough time to, I guess, harbor that, like, hate or interest in, like, Shroud as a villain because he doesn't have a lot of screen time in the story. So I was bouncing around this idea in my head of, like, well, instead of having him be, like, the central antagonist, let's say, like, we had a situation where, like, he joins the team, right? And that would throw such a huge wrench, and it would, like, kind of build more on the previous conflict that I was talking about, because it would be a real test of, can Robert let go of Mecha Man, let go of his hate of Shroud, let go of, like, this, his past, to, like, kind of grow as a person. And I thought that would have been interesting. Mind you, I'm not a writer. An idea can sound good on paper, but its execution could be, like, kind of mixed. And I don't want to hang up. I don't want to hang on to this point too long. Point is, like, the story just didn't necessarily go in a way that I thought it was going to go. And yeah, so, but again, not, I think for what we got, it is very solid. Those are really the only main two, I'm trying to think, the main two criticisms that I have. Some people didn't really like the writing of the game, because it's like very, I don't know. I don't know how they describe it. Like very Reddit-esque tier with like kind of the quippiness of the lines, which with some of the lines and some of the dialogue, which I mean, I get it. I also kind of have my own strain with like very quippy writing, but I think it works here because again of like the very solid performances. Um, Early on, people were complaining about like how your choices don't really matter in the long run of the narrative, and I never really liked that criticism. I never really agreed with it for like well, I guess like yeah, I guess like mainly two reasons now. One is that I think it's kind of misremembering how other Telltale games were like. They also kind of had like very similar. Other people were thinking like, oh, older Telltale games, like every decision like alter the story in very drastic ways. And no, a lot of them were just kind of smaller and like how you navigate like smaller situations. And there were like clear moments where like the bigger decisions were made like way more obvious and stuff like that. Um, and Yeah, so I don't think like Dispatch was necessarily any worse in that regard. And especially, and with the second point too, your choices actually do add up over time. To the point where you like get different types of cutscenes, and like what I learned later with like the ending system, it can really affect it plays into kind of this like different the score that you get that can affect that if you get like the good or bad ending um for the story. So yeah, that criticism never really, yeah, it's just it's not a really good criticism in my opinion. um but yeah, I think I guess looking onwards to the future, a lot of people are talking about like, oh, they want like a season two to Dispatch, or like for them to do more with these characters or whatever. And kind of on the fence about it. On one hand, again, I do really like all these characters, and it would be interesting to see, especially depending on what ending they make canon, um, to see how they can like further expand on the story there. Um, but at the same time, like what we got now was pretty self-contained. I think they kind of planned they weren't really sure from the onset if it was going to be popular enough to see people want to have the story continued in any way. So pretty self-contained, and I personally don't need a season two or need how I am. I'm not really like, I like self-contained stories. I don't need like these long series or whatever. But if they do more with Dispatch, I will gladly check it out. Um, but yeah, I think that is going to. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I have to really talk about. No, I think that's it. I think that's going to do it from me. But I don't know. What did you all think? Did you like Dispatch? Did you have your own criticism? The whole YouTuber thing. Leave your comment down below. I think Spotify also has a comment system now. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. And this has actually got me really curious too. I downloaded the Expanse right now, and it's got me in the hankering for more Telltale experiences. Oh, yeah, I guess that's one other thing that I really do appreciate about Dispatch is that it got. I think it's kind of like revived this love for like Telltale, and to show that there is still an interest in like these narrative type games. Because the big worry I remember, as Telltale was kind of seeing their downfall, was like, oh, people weren't going to be as interested in playing these games because with streamers you could just watch your favorite streamer go through the game themselves, and you don't have to buy it, which might still exist. I mean, I don't really know. I know a lot of people that didn't really necessarily play the game themselves, but did do that where they watched their favorite streamer play it. But I don't know, it seems to sell pretty well. And yeah, I don't know. Basically, I just hope we get The Wolf Among Us too. Okay, later.